The moment the Alpha Heir walked into my office, I knew two things. He was trouble. In a tailored suit, and I was about to say yes to something incredibly stupid. The glass walls reflected the city like a mirage, all chrome and pretense. My desk was buried under policy drafts, election data, and 3 empty coffee cups that screamed overworked consultant who doesn't sleep. I was halfway through a memo about budget reform, when the door opened without a knock. Of course. Alphas never knocked. He stepped in with the calm arrogance of someone who'd never been told no. Tall, shoulders sharp under a perfectly fitted gray suit. Dark hair neatly swept back. His eyes, cold steel blue, swept across the room, not in arrogance exactly, but in calculation. "You're Kale Arden," he said. His voice was deep, smooth, a little too calm. "I was told you're the best political strategist in the capital." "I'm also the most expensive," I replied, without looking up from my laptop. That tends to scare away people who like to give orders. He didn't flinch. "Good. I'm not here to give orders." I raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want, Lord?" "Thorin Vale," he said simply. "Head of the Vale clan." That made me look up. The Vale clan. One of the oldest alpha houses in the region, known for their control of the council, their traditionalism, and their taste for bloodline politics. Their new leader had inherited the position after his father's unfortunate and very public death 6 months ago. And now he was standing in my office, alone, bold, or suicidal. Hard to tell which. Thorin took a slow breath, as if measuring his words. "I need you to fix my council before it kills me." That got my attention. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my pen against the desk. "You need a miracle worker, not a political consultant. I was told you specialize in impossible things." I smiled despite myself. Damn it. He moved closer, resting one gloved hand on the edge of my desk. "You've advised 3 clans through political reform, negotiated peace during the Beta riots, and somehow survived the capital summit without being assassinated. That sounds like a miracle worker to me. Or someone with good insurance," I said dryly. That earned the faintest flicker of amusement, a ghost of a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was the first human thing about him. "Tell me, Lord Vale," I continued, "why would a man born to power need someone like me to protect him from it?" He hesitated. A pause long enough for me to hear the rain begin to fall against the glass. Then he said quietly, "Because I can't trust the people who swore to protect me." The line was simple, but the weight behind it landed like a stone in my chest. I hated that. I hated that it made me curious. I glanced at him again. The rigid posture, the control in every breath, the faint tension in his jaw that betrayed exhaustion. He was the kind of alpha who had spent his entire life holding himself together for everyone else. And I had made a career out of watching powerful men unravel. "I'll need full access to your council records, correspondence, and internal budgets," I said, turning my laptop toward him. "If I'm going to fix this, I need to see just how bad it is." "You'll have it," he said immediately. "Don't agree so fast," I muttered. "You haven't even heard my fee." He met my gaze evenly. "Whatever it is, I'll pay it." I laughed, sharp and low. "You should have opened with that." He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "You don't like alphas, do you?" "Not particularly," I said. "You tend to think you're the center of gravity. Makes everyone else dizzy." To my surprise, he didn't take offense. "Then I'll make sure to stay out of your orbit." That was not the answer I expected. There was something about the way he said it, too calm, too self-aware, that made me think he wasn't as rigid as the rumors claimed. And that was dangerous. I sighed, shutting my laptop. "Fine. I'll take the job. But don't mistake me for one of your subordinates, Lord Vale. I work with my clients, not under them." His mouth curved, almost into a smile. "Then I suppose I'll need someone smart enough to slip out of my control." "I'm flattered," I said. "But if you try to leash me, I bite." He inclined his head, as if considering the statement literally. "I'll keep that in mind." When he turned to leave, I finally exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath the entire time. His cologne lingered in the air, subtle and infuriatingly clean. The city lights flickered against the glass as I leaned back, staring at my reflection. An omega. With a bad attitude, and a worse habit of getting involved in things that could kill him. I should have said no. I always said no to alphas. But there was something in the way he'd looked at me. Not as property. Not as a pawn. But as a weapon he didn't know how to use yet. And that was my weakness. When the door closed behind him, I whispered to myself, "Well, Kale, congratulations. You've just signed up to either make history, or get murdered trying." Then I smiled. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't bored. The council chamber was colder than I'd expected. A cathedral of marble and silence, designed to make everyone inside feel small. It didn't work on me. The long obsidian table stretched between us, like a battlefield. The walls were carved with the Vale insignia, wolves' crowns, and the kind of self-importance only ancient money could afford. 12 council members sat in a semicircle, their robes pristine, their expressions soured by my mere presence. I'd barely taken my seat beside Thorin before the first one spoke. "Is this a joke?" Lord Merrin's voice rasped like dry paper. "You brought an omega to a council meeting?" Thorin didn't flinch. "I brought a political strategist." Merrin's eyes flicked toward me, full of disdain. An omega's place is behind his alpha, not beside him. I smiled pleasantly, the kind of smile that always meant trouble. "That explains a lot about the state of your politics." The room went still. A few members turned toward me, shocked that I'd dared to speak. Merrin's face flushed an impressive shade of crimson. "Excuse me?" I folded my hands neatly on the table. "If obedience were intelligence, my lord, this council would have solved its corruption issues decades ago. Unfortunately, you seem to have confused silence for wisdom." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the chamber. Thorin didn't stop me. In fact, I could feel his attention sharpen beside me. Not disapproval, not quite amusement either. He was studying me, like I was a new weapon he hadn't learned how to wield yet. Merrin slammed his palm on the table. "How dare you!" "Please," I interrupted softly. "If I had a credit for every offended traditionalist, I'd be funding my own campaign by now." Laughter broke out. Short, nervous, but it was enough. One of the younger councilmen smirked into his sleeve. Thorin's gaze flickered toward me. I couldn't tell if he was warning me to stop, or inviting me to continue. So naturally I continued. "Your people are restless," I said. "Your beta labor unions are threatening walkouts. Your revenue from border trade has dropped by 20%, and you're sitting here arguing about who's allowed to sit at the table. Tell me, my lord, which of those issues will collapse your clan faster, my existence, or your incompetence?" Merrin's mouth opened, then shut. He looked to Thorin for support, but Thorin remained perfectly calm. "The consultant is correct," Thorin said finally. "You've had months to act, and you've done nothing. Perhaps it's time someone did." I didn't have to look at him to know I'd just earned half the room's hatred, and, possibly, Thorin's reluctant respect. When the session finally adjourned, the council filed out in stiff silence. I lingered behind, scribbling notes on a tablet. "You enjoyed that," came Thorin's voice, quiet but certain. I didn't look up. If they're going to call me a dog, I might as well bite. He stepped closer, his reflection catching on the marble floor. Precise, composed, irritatingly graceful. "You know you just made half of them your enemies." "Oh please," I said. "They were never going to like me. I might as well make it productive." A pause. "You're not afraid?" "Of what? Old men with fragile egos?" I stood, meeting his gaze. "I've survived worse. Like staff meetings." That almost drew a laugh. Almost. Thorin's mouth twitched, and for the first time, I caught a glimpse of warmth beneath all that composure. He inclined his head slightly, almost like acknowledgement, then turned away. That evening I found him again, purely by accident, in one of the long, glass corridors connecting the council wing to the residence tower. The hall was dim, city lights glimmering through the windows like spilled stars. He stopped when he saw me. "You're working late." "I'd say the same to you, but I doubt you ever stop." A small silence stretched between us, filled only by the hum of distant elevators. He folded his arms. "Tell me something, Kale. Why do you despise the system so much?" It was almost a genuine question. No authority in his tone, just curiosity. That was new. I leaned against the glass, watching our reflections blur into the city below. Because it gives the stupid too much power. He blinked, startled, then let out a quiet exhale. Something that wasn't quite laughter, wasn't quite a sigh. That's a dangerous opinion. Good thing I don't care about safety. For a heartbeat, his eyes softened. There was something in them, not pity, not superiority, but recognition, like he knew exactly what it was to be trapped by a system built to keep you obedient. "Good night, Lord Vale," I said, pushing off the glass. He hesitated. "Good night, Kale." Hearing my name in his voice did something strange to my chest. A flicker I refused to name. As I walked away, I caught a glimpse of him in the reflection. He was still standing there, watching the city, or maybe watching me. And for the first time I realized I wasn't the only one questioning what power really meant. The council chamber smelled of incense and politics. Someone had decided that this ridiculous confirmation ritual would prove my loyalty, and my biology, to the Vale clan. Which frankly, said more about their paranoia than my qualifications. 12 council members formed a semicircle behind Thorin's chair, their eyes gleaming in the candlelight, like vultures waiting for a meal. At the center of the room stood a carved obsidian pedestal, etched with the clan's crest. The wolf, crowned by flame. I was supposed to kneel, press my hand to the seal, and let it resonate with my alpha's energy. Ancient nonsense, wrapped in ceremony. Still, I played along. I knelt, placed my palm on the cool stone, and waited for the expected burn. That faint electrical pulse, that meant an omega, recognized an alpha's authority. The air grew heavy. I heard a few murmurs, the shuffling of robes. The seal began to glow faintly under my hand. Then, nothing. The light flickered out. The warmth never came. A silence fell over the room. Thick, offended. Lord Marin coughed pointedly. Perhaps the consultant lacks proper instinct. I smiled without looking up. Guess I'm defective. Don't worry, it's not contagious. Someone choked on a laugh before quickly disguising it as a cough. Thorin's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. The seal must be malfunctioning. It's an ancient relic, Varen said coolly, her gaze fixed on me like a hawk's. It does not malfunction. She was elegant, dangerous. The kind of woman who could poison you with a compliment. Her silver hair gleamed under the candlelight, her posture immaculate. I didn't miss the way her eyes flickered to my hand, then to Thorin. Perhaps, she said, the problem lies not with the seal, but with the omega. I stood slowly, brushing the dust from my knees. Or perhaps the problem is that you expect obedience from people who stopped believing in your magic tricks. That earned me a collective gasp. Thorin didn't move, didn't even blink. But I caught the smallest twitch in his fingers. A warning or amusement, I couldn't tell. Varen's smile sharpened. Careful, Mr. Arden. Defiance is rarely rewarded here. I met her gaze. Then it's a good thing I don't work for here. I work for him. That silenced her. Thorin dismissed the gathering with a cool nod. The ritual is concluded. The consultant's loyalty will be proven by his results, not a relic. He turned and left the room first, and I followed, aware of 12 pairs of eyes burning holes in my back. Hours later, I was still in his office, half asleep in an armchair surrounded by the scent of old wood and candle wax. Thorin had been pacing for the last 20 minutes, his composure cracking just enough to reveal unease. He finally stopped, looking at me. Does it hurt? I blinked awake. What? The seal, he said. When it failed. Did it hurt? Only when I have to explain it to men like you, I murmured, rubbing my eyes. To my mild surprise, he didn't snap back. He just stood there, thoughtful. I've seen hundreds of these ceremonies, he said quietly. Every omega reacts. The bond is automatic. But you didn't, I finished for him. Yes, I noticed. He studied me like he was trying to read an equation that refused to balance. It shouldn't be possible. Neither should most of what I do, I said, standing and stretching. If it bothers the council, consider it a gift. His lips twitched. A gift? Nothing terrifies old men faster than a system they can't control. That time, he smiled. Just barely. But it was real. Later that night, after I'd fallen asleep in the same chair, I wasn't proud of it. Thorin remained at his desk. The room was dim. The candles burned low. He'd pulled out a box of old documents from the family archives, the seal of his late father still intact on the lid. Inside were letters, research reports, and a faded file marked Project Free Omega. The notes described genetic trials, failed subjects, and a theory about breaking instinctual dominance through biological isolation. His father's handwriting filled the margins. Freedom without hierarchy is chaos. But perhaps it's the only way to survive it. Thorin sat back, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. He glanced at me. Still asleep, hair tousled, jacket half off one shoulder. I looked nothing like a weapon. Yet something about the quiet in the room, the way the candles flickered but didn't die, made him uneasy. For the first time, the young alpha who commanded armies and councils felt something close to fear. Not of betrayal, but of change. Because if the seal truly couldn't bind me, then maybe nothing could. And if nothing could, then everything might. Rain whispered against the glass, turning the city lights into a watercolor blur. The office smelled faintly of ink, firewood, and expensive frustration. I sat on the floor surrounded by stacks of old reports, my sleeves rolled up, coffee gone cold. Most of these records hadn't been touched since Thorin's father's time. Half of them still sealed with wax, others reeking of dust and political rot. Thorin was at his desk, reading through budget summaries, like a man dissecting his own corpse. "You know," I said, holding up one particularly suspicious ledger, "if someone's been bleeding your accounts dry, they're either very clever or very confident." He didn't look up. Both, most likely. The rain deepened. Soft, but relentless. I flipped another page, scanning rows of numbers that didn't add up. Transfers hidden under maintenance expenses, ghost projects, inflated costs for infrastructure stability. I found at least 6 payments labeled as cultural preservation, I said. Unless your clan suddenly developed a taste for interpretive dance. Someone's laundering money. That finally earned a look. And how exactly do you know what laundering looks like? I smirked. Because I've done it. Legally, of course. Campaign financing. Don't look at me like that. His mouth twitched. You are remarkably honest for someone with so many questionable skills. It saves time, I said, flipping another page. And lies are inefficient. He set his pen down, rubbing his temples. You are exhausting. I looked up at him, grinning. You mean effective? Both. The fire crackled softly. We worked in silence for a while, him cross-referencing budgets, me sorting through the lies of dead men. At some point, I muttered something about nobles and their gold-plated egos, which made him glance at me sharply. What? I asked. He raised an eyebrow. Did you just call me a noble with a gold-plated ego? No, I said innocently. I said nobles like you. Specifically, ones with a superiority complex the size of a city tower. His tone cooled. You enjoy provoking people, don't you? Only the ones who think they're untouchable. He exhaled, slow and controlled, then leaned back in his chair. You're calling me an heir with a god complex. More like an heir with a delusional sense of destiny, I said. It's a subtype. To my absolute surprise, he laughed. Not loud, not open, but real, low, rough, unguarded. Do you ever stop provoking? He asked after a pause. Do you ever stop planning? No, then no. He shook his head, still smiling faintly. Not unless someone makes you. Good luck with that, I said, yawning. At some point, the rain and the silence blurred together. The fire dimmed. I meant to just rest my eyes for a second, only a second. But when I woke, the light had shifted. The fire burned low, and someone had draped a heavy coat over me. Thorin's coat. I blinked, trying to decide whether to feel flattered or insulted. My head still hurt from lack of sleep. When I stirred, his voice came from across the room, quiet and warm like velvet over steel. You should get real rest, Kale. I faked a stretch, deliberately casual. Didn't mean to fall asleep. I was just meditating on fiscal irresponsibility. His lips curved slightly. And did enlightenment come to you? Only the part where your counsel can't count. He stood by the window now, hands clasped behind his back, watching the rain. The candlelight caught the gold insignia of the Vale Wolf on his shoulder. So precise, it looked alive. You know, I said softly, for someone who's supposed to rule a clan, you spend a lot of time cleaning up other people's messes. That's leadership, he said. Cleaning what others refuse to see. Or denial, I countered. Depends on your taste. He turned toward me with that same calm, unreadable look. And yet you stay. Someone has to make sure you don't drown in your own idealism. Later that night, I woke again to the sound of movement. Soft, deliberate, not Thorin's. The rain still fell, steady as breathing. Through the half-open door to the archives, I caught a shadow shifting between shelves. I moved quietly, barefoot across the floor. The intruder was rifling through the locked cabinets, fast, efficient, like someone who'd done this before. I was halfway to shouting when Thorin appeared from the opposite end of the corridor, silent as a ghost. His eyes met mine across the dim light, and without a word, we moved. The thief turned too late. Thorin caught his wrist, I swept his legs. Papers scattered like startled birds. For a moment, only our breathing filled the room. The intruder, a young clerk by the look of him, froze, terror in his eyes. "Please," he gasped. "You don't understand. They'll kill me." Thorin's voice was ice. "Who sent you?" But the man only choked, eyes wide with some unseen fear, before collapsing at our feet. Dead. No mark, no sound, just gone. I stared down at him, pulse hammering. "Well," I whispered. "That's not ominous at all." Thorin's expression was unreadable as he looked toward the open window, rain streaming in. "No," he said quietly. "It's just beginning." And for the first time, I realized this wasn't only politics anymore. Something much darker was moving beneath the surface. The cell smelled of damp stone and blood. The thief lay bound to the chair, his wrists trembling against the iron cuffs. His face was pale, eyes flicking between me and Thorin like a cornered animal. The torches threw long shadows on the walls, stretching and twisting with every flicker of flame. Thorin's voice was calm, too calm. "Who sent you?" The man swallowed hard. You don't understand. I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Thorin said, stepping closer. "And you chose to break into my archives." I stood a few feet away, arms crossed, trying not to breathe too deeply. There was something wrong about this man. Not just fear. The kind of wrong that made the air taste metallic. The thief's gaze darted to me. "You..." His voice cracked. It wasn't supposed to be him. Thorin's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" The man's breathing quickened. "The seal. It wasn't meant for him." Then he convulsed. It happened too fast. His body arched, mouth open in a silent scream, and blood ran from his nose like ink. His pulse stopped before Thorin even reached him. The torches hissed. For a moment, the silence was absolute. "Poison," Thorin murmured, kneeling to check. "Fast acting. Probably embedded in a tooth capsule." I stared at the corpse. My hands had gone cold. "You think he killed himself?" "I think," Thorin said quietly. Someone made sure he wouldn't talk. The room felt smaller suddenly, the stone walls pressing in. My stomach twisted. Not from fear, but from that familiar feeling of stepping into a game I hadn't been told the rules of. I took a step back, exhaling shakily. "You realize your entire council is probably plotting against you, right?" Thorin looked up at me then. Not as a ruler, not even as an alpha, but as a man too tired to lie. "Yes." Something in my chest cracked at the honesty in that single word. I turned away, rubbing the back of my neck. "Let's get out of here," he said. "You're shaking." "I'm not," but I was. We ended up in his office again, the storm still raging outside. The fire burned low, filling the room with a dull orange glow. I was pacing. "The seal wasn't meant for him," I muttered. "What the hell does that even mean?" Thorin stood by the mantel, silent. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass cabinet. A dark figure framed by light. "Maybe he meant your father," I said. "Maybe... Kale." I stopped. He crossed the room in 2 steps, his hand closing around my arm before I could move. His grip was firm, grounding. But something shifted the moment our skin met. A spark, not heat, not pain. Connection. The air thickened. My heartbeat spiked. Every nerve in my body went electric. "What?" I hissed, trying to pull back, but I couldn't. I didn't want to. The energy surged between us, not as dominance or command, but resonance, equal and opposite. I felt him. Not his thoughts, but his emotions. The weight of his exhaustion. The brittle calm he wore like armor. The ache of loneliness buried under centuries of tradition. It was overwhelming. Intimate in a way words could never be. And then it was gone. I stumbled back, gasping. My pulse roared in my ears. "What the hell did you do to me?" Thorin's eyes were wide, his own breathing ragged. "Nothing," he said. Maybe you did it to me." The mark on my wrist, the dormant Omega seal, burned faintly for the first time, but the light wasn't red like it should have been. It glowed white gold, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Impossible," Thorin whispered, reaching out before stopping himself. "It shouldn't react like that." I backed up a step. "You're telling me?" We stared at each other, both caught between fear and fascination. I swallowed hard. "So, what is this?" He shook his head slowly. "It's not a bond. Not the way the seals are supposed to work." "No," I said quietly. "It's worse." He tilted his head. "Worse?" "It's equal." That silenced him. For a long time, neither of us moved. The fire cracked, thunder rolled through the windows, and I could still feel him. A faint hum under my skin, like a magnetic pull I couldn't shake. When I finally spoke, my voice was low. "If anyone finds out about this—" "They won't," he said quickly. "I'll make sure of it." I laughed once, bitterly. "You can't even trust your own counsel. You think you can control this?" "No," he admitted. "But I can protect it." He said it like a vow. And something inside me, the part that should have been terrified, almost believed him. I sank into the chair, running a hand through my hair. "You have no idea what you've done, do you?" He stood there in silence, watching me with an expression I couldn't name. When I finally looked up, I caught the faintest echo of that resonance again, a flicker between us, invisible but undeniable. Neither of us said it aloud, but we both understood. Whatever had just happened, we were bound now. Not by blood, not by instinct, but by something far more dangerous. The ballroom glittered like a glass cage. Light spilled from chandeliers onto mirrored walls, multiplying every smile, every secret, every pair of eyes pretending not to stare. The veil crest hung above the grand staircase, a wolf of gold, its reflection fractured in the mirrors like 1,000 hungry ghosts. And I was standing in the middle of it, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my old apartment, and pretending to be someone's beloved. "Smile," Thorin murmured beside me without moving his lips. "They're watching." "I am smiling," I muttered. "Can't you tell?" He glanced down at me, expression unreadable. "That looks more like you're planning an assassination." "Maybe I am." Try to look less convincing. The orchestra swelled, drowning my reply. Couples glided across the floor in perfect symmetry. Power disguised as grace. The council sat along the edges like predators dressed in silk, eyes sharp behind their polite masks. Thorin leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. "Stay near me. If they think we're divided, they'll strike." "Oh, don't worry," I said sweetly. "Wouldn't want to ruin your romantic image." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His hand slid to the small of my back as he guided me toward the center of the room. It wasn't a possessive touch, more like choreography, but my pulse still skipped. We moved together through the crowd, our reflection flickering endlessly in the mirrors. Alpha and Omega, predator and partner, truth and illusion. I leaned in, my voice low enough for only him. "You play the master role too well." Thorin's lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smirk. "You wrote the script." I almost laughed. Almost. We stopped near the council dais. Varin stood there, in shimmering silver, elegance weaponized. Her smile could have cut glass. "Lord Vale," she greeted, voice like honey poured over knives. "You've outdone yourself. Such a beautiful event." "Thank you, Aunt." Thorin said smoothly. Her gaze flicked to me, assessing, amused. And your companion? I bowed just enough to be polite. Consultant. Actually. Of course. Her eyes glittered. Though tonight, appearances matter more than titles. Before I could reply, she turned and beckoned someone forward. A young Omega in pale blue silk, all wide eyes and carefully curated innocence. This is Lady Cerys, Varen purred. From the eastern houses. She's been quite eager to meet you. Of course she has, I thought grimly. Thorin inclined his head. An honor, Lady Cerys. Her cheeks flushed prettily. The honor is mine, my lord. My father speaks very highly of your leadership. I smiled tightly, pretending to sip my champagne while imagining throwing it. Varen's tone dripped with false warmth. You see, Kale, some Omegas still appreciate tradition. You must find that refreshing. Oh, absolutely, I said lightly. It's always refreshing to meet someone so comfortable being owned. A few heads turned. Varen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened like drawn blades. Thorin coughed into his fist. A poor disguise for a laugh. I think we'll take a turn around the floor, he said, offering me his hand. Varen's eyebrow arched. Already? The music has only just begun. Then we won't waste it, he said simply. The moment my hand touched his, the air shifted. He led me into the waltz, movements practiced, effortless. To the crowd, it was theater. The Alpha leading his Omega, the perfect picture of submission and control. But every step was a conversation, every turn a quiet argument only we could hear. You shouldn't antagonize her, he murmured. Shouldn't you? I countered. You're the one she's trying to marry off. That's politics. That's cowardice. He gave me a look that almost passed for a glare. Or maybe amusement. You're enjoying this. Maybe a little. The music swelled. Our reflections blurred in the mirrored walls. Too close, too vivid. Careful, he said softly. People might think you actually like me. Relax, I whispered. I'm just good at pretending. He leaned closer, his breath ghosting against my cheek. So am I. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The music, the crowd, the storm outside. Just the heat of his hand at my waist, and the impossible calm in his eyes. It should have been an act. It was an act. But when he pulled me a little closer, I didn't pull away. Not this time. When the music ended, the applause was distant, almost unreal. Thorin released me slowly, his expression neutral again, but something had shifted between us. Something neither of us wanted to name. The council clapped politely. Varen's gaze burned like frost. And in the mirror behind us, I caught our reflection. His hand still hovering just above mine as if reluctant to let go. The old archives were buried deep beneath the manor, a maze of stone corridors, and locked rooms that smelled of dust, candle wax, and things long forgotten. I wasn't supposed to be there, but curiosity had never cared much for permission. The light from my lantern spilled across rows of metal cabinets and leather-bound journals. Every drawer was a confession, waiting to be found. The deeper I went, the older the air felt. As if the walls themselves remembered too much. I found it behind a false panel, a box stamped with the Vale crest, and sealed with wax so brittle it cracked under my fingers. Inside, yellowed papers, torn reports, handwritten notes in a precise, elegant hand. Across the top page, one phrase repeated again and again in the margins. Project Free Omega. My chest tightened. Half the documents were scientific. Genetic maps, trial data, biological models of how dominance could be rewired. But between the formulas were letters, written in Thorin's father's unmistakable script. They think nature cannot change. But power is not instinct. It is design. If we can unmake it, perhaps we can unchain what we became. I barely noticed Thorin entering until his shadow crossed the light. What did you find? His voice echoed softly through the chamber, lower than usual. I held out one of the letters. Proof that your father wasn't the man they said he was. He took it, scanning the page, his brow tightening as he read. The silence between us grew heavy. When he spoke again, it wasn't for me. He was trying to change it all. The hierarchy, the seals, the laws. He wanted a system built on reason, not instinct. He Tried to free people like me, I said quietly. Thorin's eyes lifted to mine. And they killed him for it. The words hung there. Simple, final, cruelly true. For a long time, neither of us moved. The only sound was the faint hiss of the lantern flame. I always thought he was strict, Thorin murmured, voice distant. Detached. I blamed him for everything that went wrong with this clan. But this... He gestured to the letters. This wasn't a man serving power. This was someone trying to dismantle it. I looked around the room. The old books, the silence, the echo of a dream that died before it began. And now you're standing in his place. He let out a hollow laugh. As a puppet to the same people who murdered him. The raw honesty of it caught me off guard. I'd never heard him sound so human. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Maybe the universe has a dark sense of humor. Or maybe it's giving you a second chance to finish what he started. Thorin looked up sharply. You think I could? I think you already are, I said. Whether you mean to or not. He stared at me for a long moment, eyes searching mine, as if trying to read something I wasn't saying. Then, softer than I'd ever heard, he said, Kale. Just that. No title, no edge, my name. And something in me cracked a little. No one in that house ever said my name without agenda. Hearing it from him, quietly, deliberately, felt like standing in a place where the rules didn't reach. For a heartbeat, the air between us shifted again. That faint hum I'd felt since the seal reacted. I could sense his pulse, steady but strained, his emotions pressing against mine like waves against glass. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on the papers in my hand. If the council learns what's in here, they'll destroy it. They'll destroy you. Then we don't let them. The flame flickered. Our reflections shimmered on the polished cabinet beside us, too close, too real. His hand brushed mine as he took one of the letters, and the touch sent a faint tremor through the air again. The seal pulsed once against my wrist, as if reminding me it existed. A soft sound broke the moment. The faintest click of a shoe against stone. Thorin froze. I turned, but the corridor was already empty. Only the light of a dying candle moved at the end of the hall. Still, I could feel it. The lingering presence of someone watching. Varin. I didn't need to see her to know. Thorin's voice was low. She knows. Then, I said, closing the box and blowing out the lantern, we'd better give her a reason to be afraid. The night the coup began, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The council courtyard was bathed in torchlight, sharp, gold and cruel. Storm clouds crawled over the capital like an omen. The banners of the Vale clan rippled above us, perfect and hollow, as if pretending not to sense the rot underneath. Varin stood at the top of the marble steps, flanked by guards in black. Her poise was immaculate. Not a strand of silver hair was out of place. Lord Vale, she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the courtyard. By decree of the council, you are charged with treason, conspiracy, falsification of state records, and the intent to dismantle the hierarchy of clans. The accusations hit like thunder. The crowd of attendants and soldiers murmured, some stepping back, others lowering their heads. Thorin didn't flinch. Treason? He said calmly. You stand on my land, under my seal, and accuse me of treason? Varin's expression didn't waver. Your father's ambition cost us our stability. We won't let his son repeat his mistakes. And then the soldiers moved. Steel flashed in torchlight. I barely had time to react before the guards closed in around him. Thorin resisted at first, not with violence, but with authority. His voice cut through the air like a blade. Stand down! But his command, once absolute, carried no power now. The soldiers hesitated only long enough for Varin to nod. And then they seized him. Take him to the lower chambers, she ordered. We will restore order before dawn. Thorin's eyes found mine through the chaos. Steady, unreadable, but burning. Kale, run. I didn't run, not at first. But survival had a way of overriding pride. I slipped through the side passages of the manor, down to the service tunnels that led to the old archives. My pulse thundered in my ears. I could still hear Varin's voice echoing in the courtyard above, the calm of a predator who believed she'd already won. By the time I reached the communications office, my hands were shaking. Elias's voice buzzed through the encrypted channel, groggy, but alert. Kale? Do you have any idea what time? Listen carefully, I hissed, pulling a data drive from my jacket. You're about to get something dangerous. Files, reports, letters, everything about the Council's involvement in the Project Free Omega and Lord Vale's father's death. Leak it. Now. Every channel, every outlet. He went silent. You're serious. Elias, if you ever wanted to make history, this is your chance. A pause. Then, faintly, the sound of keys clacking. Uploading. You better live long enough to say, I told you so. No promises, I muttered, and killed the connection. By the time I reached the underground cells, the storm had broken. Rain hammered the stone above, like a drumbeat. Thorin was chained, bruised but defiant, his coat discarded, his dignity intact. Varen was waiting outside his cell, her silhouette sharp against the torchlight. You should have fled when you had the chance, she said when she saw me. Instead, you came back. Curiosity, I said. I wanted to see what betrayal looks like up close. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You misunderstand me. I admired you, Kale. Your mind, your defiance. You could have had a future here, protected, respected. All you had to do was step aside. I laughed softly. Respect, in this system? You mistake obedience for honor. Then let's be practical. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Walk away from him. From this chaos. I'll erase your record. Give you freedom, wealth, safety. All you have to do is give me the seal research. For a moment, I actually looked at her. At the calm power in her eyes, the certainty that everyone would eventually bow to survival. I've lived on my knees long enough, I said. Her face hardened. Then you'll die on your feet. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an answer. The next few seconds blurred. The hiss of steel, the cry of a guard, the shattering of the cell lock. I wasn't sure who struck first, me or Thorin, but by the time the dust settled, the guard was down, and Thorin was free. He grabbed my wrist. You shouldn't have come back. Tell that to your aunt, I said through gritted teeth. She's losing her audience. We ran, down the narrow corridors, past the archives, toward the storm-lit courtyard. The alarm bells were already ringing. At the last turn, I felt it, a sharp pain tearing through my side. I looked down. Blood. Kale. Thorin caught me before I hit the ground. His face, usually carved from marble, cracked open in panic. No, stay with me. It's fine, I managed, breathless. Just a flesh wound. You're bleeding through your damn shirt. Better than through my reputation. Stop talking. He half carried me through the exit, rain soaking us both. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the chaos. Soldiers scattering, the manor, burning at its edges, the sound of shouts and orders, lost to the storm. When we finally stopped in the garden beyond the walls, I slumped against the marble fountain, breathing hard. Thorin crouched beside me, hands steady but trembling. For the first time, there was no command in his voice, only fear. You could have left, he said. I told you, I murmured. I don't like easy exits. He exhaled shakily, pressing his forehead briefly to mine, a gesture that wasn't quite instinct, wasn't quite human. If I lose you, you won't, I said. Not yet. The thunder rolled again, distant now. Behind us, the manor burned. Ahead, only darkness and rain. But for the first time, I didn't feel alone in it. And when he finally lifted me to my feet, his hands were shaking. Not from the cold, but from the unbearable truth that leaders are never supposed to feel this much. When I woke, the world smelled of iron and smoke. My side burned, a deep, dull ache that throbbed with every breath. The ceiling above me was low, the stone walls close, candlelight trembling like it feared to touch me. Somewhere nearby, water dripped. The sound was maddeningly steady. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then the pain reminded me. The coup, the blood, the rain, and Thorin. I turned my head, too fast, and saw him sitting beside the cot, still in his torn shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hands were stained with dried blood. Mine, apparently. His eyes, however, were clear and sleepless. "You're awake," he said quietly, like he wasn't sure I should be. "Unfortunately," I rasped. My voice cracked. He exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders, though he didn't smile. "You lost a lot of blood. The blade missed anything vital, but—" He hesitated. "You scared me." I stared at him. "You don't get scared." "Apparently, I do." He leaned forward, pressing a damp cloth gently to my side. The touch made me hiss. And he froze. "Don't." I started. "You need to stay still. I need a drink." His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "Later." I watched him work, the steady, precise movements of someone used to control. But his hands trembled faintly. Just enough for me to notice. He was breaking protocol in every possible way. The Alpha tending to the Omega, not as master, not as healer, but as someone who refused to leave. "Why are you doing this?" I muttered. His eyes flicked up. "Because I don't want to lose you." The simplicity of it hit harder than any argument. I looked away, biting back something sharp and stupid and emotional. Silence stretched between us. The fire in the corner popped, casting shadows across the stone floor. "You realize," I said finally, voice rough, "I was never yours." He didn't react right away. Then softly, almost a whisper, "Good." I blinked. "Good?" Thorin's gaze held mine, steady and raw. "Because I'd rather you stayed by choice." The words sank into the air like heat. Quiet, undeniable. My throat tightened. I wanted to say something clever, something cutting, but all that came out was a weak laugh. "That's dangerously romantic of you." "I'll deny it later," he said. A ghost of a smile tugged at my lips. "You'd better—" He reached for the bandage again, but his hand brushed my wrist instead. The contact was accidental, or maybe not. The bond flared between us, not violently this time but softly, like a steady current humming beneath skin. I felt his pulse through the connection, calm and grounding, not dominance, not claim. Just presence. It didn't hurt. It didn't demand. It simply was. I could feel him, his exhaustion, his quiet fury, his relief, and beneath it all, that strange, reluctant tenderness neither of us had the language for. "You feel that too," I said quietly. He nodded once. "It's stabilizing." "What does that even mean?" "It means," he said, voice low, "that whatever this is, it's not about hierarchy anymore." For a moment, I let that sink in. A bond without control, without fear, equal. It shouldn't have existed. And yet, it did. I closed my eyes. "You're still impossible." "So are you," he said. His fingers lingered against my skin before he pulled away, slow and careful, as though afraid the air might break between us. The firelight flickered, reflecting faintly in his eyes. He looked tired. The kind of tired that went deeper than sleep. Outside, the storm had finally passed. I could hear the faint echo of wind through the cracks above. "You should rest," he murmured. "I will," I lied. He gave a quiet, knowing sigh. "Kale." Something in the way he said my name made my pulse falter. Soft, protective, almost reverent. When he stood to leave, I caught his hand without thinking. Just a touch. Nothing more. But it stopped him. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. Because in that single fragile moment, the hierarchy shattered, the blood dried, the pain faded. And all that remained was the quiet, dangerous truth neither of us could deny anymore. We weren't bound by instinct. We were choosing this. Morning came quietly, as if the city itself needed time to believe it had survived the night. The balcony overlooked a skyline reborn. Smoke still rising from the lower districts, but sunlight breaking through in thin golden shards. The wind smelled of rain and stone, and something that might almost have been hope. I leaned against the railing, a cup of coffee in hand, watching the light crawl across the rooftops. Behind me, papers rustled, the sound of Thorin being far too diligent for someone who hadn't slept. "Do you ever stop working?" I asked without turning. He was sitting at the table, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair a little too unruly for a man who usually looked carved out of discipline. "Not when I have an entire system to rebuild," he said, his voice low but steady. The new council is forming today, I reminded him. You might want to pretend you're mortal for 5 minutes. Coming from you, he said, that's almost funny. I smirked into my coffee. Almost. He finally set the papers down, rubbing his temples. The old council has been dissolved. The houses agreed to the reforms. The seal protocols will be suspended indefinitely. So we're free? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Free enough to make our own mistakes, he said. Charming. He stood and joined me on the balcony, the light catching the faint scar at his temple. The air between us felt lighter than it had in weeks, the kind of quiet that doesn't need to prove itself. You know, I said after a while, I still can't believe they let me into the new council. They didn't let you, he said. You earned it. I snorted. The first Omega with an actual vote. I'm sure that's making some traditionalists choke on their breakfast. I imagine so, he said dryly. Varin has already moved to her estate in the east. The rest will follow soon enough. Exile looks good on her. He almost smiled. Don't tempt me to agree out loud. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet stone and early sunlight. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. It was strange. After all the fire and chaos, this peace felt louder than war. I didn't know what to do with it yet. Thorin's hand brushed the railing beside mine. Not touching, not claiming, just close enough to be felt. I keep thinking, he said quietly. If my father could see this, he'd tell me we were both insane. Your father wanted freedom, I said. You just took the long way getting there. He turned toward me then, eyes warm in the morning light. Freedom's easier to want than to build. Tell me about it, I murmured. A pause, the kind that carries weight without demanding it. You know, I said finally, staring out at the skyline. I never wanted to belong to anyone. He smiled, the kind of smile that made his usual reserve look almost human. Then, it's a good thing you chose to stay. I looked at him. The man who had been my adversary, my employer, my partner, in revolution, and somehow, against every rule written for us, my equal, not my choice, I said softly. My victory. He chuckled under his breath. Spoken like a true strategist. Spoken like someone who's done following orders. The wind grew stronger, fluttering the papers behind us. Somewhere inside the manor, the new staff was rearranging the meeting hall for the first session of the Reformed Council. Thorin stepped back into the room, muttering something about coffee. When he returned, he handed me a mug. The smell hit me first. Sharp, burnt, catastrophic. I stared into it. What is this? Coffee, he said, entirely serious. No, Thorin, this is revenge. He frowned. I followed the instructions. Whose? The Inquisition's? He raised an eyebrow. You could just say thank you. I could, I said, sniffing the cup again. But then I'd be lying. He sighed, taking it back. Fine. You make it. Oh no, I said, smirking. You started this. Finish what you brewed. He gave me a look that could have melted steel. But then, to my utter disbelief, took a sip. And immediately grimaced. See? I said, triumphant. Equality achieved. We both suffer. He laughed then, properly laughed, the sound breaking through the still morning like sunlight. And for once, I didn't feel the need to analyze it. We stood there, side by side, watching the city wake. Not as Alpha and Omega. Not as ruler and subordinate. But as two fools who'd somehow survived the impossible. Somewhere below, bells began to ring. Not for morning, but for something new. And as the first real light of dawn spread over the towers, I realized I was finally, irrevocably, free. Not by his command, not by blood, but by choice. My victory.